Hey guys, welcome back to the Sober Fix podcast channel. If you're just checking it out for the first time, I appreciate it, man. We talk about addiction, recovery, sobriety, just living that good life, distancing ourselves from all the terrible past that most of us experience. We've got another episode on today. We got Mark O'Sullivan. He is an Irishman straight from the UK, found alcohol at a young age and quickly found that it wasn't working for him. Couldn't show up for work the next day. And his dad was a functioning guy who drank, and he watched him in the bars and said, man, he enjoys alcohol with his friends. He has no problem. He shows up to work every day. But it wasn't the same for Mark. And he goes into that. He's an author. He's a really cool guy. He's got a lot of great experience for those that are just starting their sobriety journey or those that have been sober for decades, because he's got 30 plus years of sobriety. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what's going on with you. How many days sober do you have? What's your sober date? Do you have any questions that you want me to ask other guests on different episodes? Let's get into it, guys. All right, we are back, the Sober Fix podcast. What's up, everyone? It is Drew. I've got another great guest on today. We've got Mark O'Sullivan. He reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and it's awesome, man. He's got over 35 plus years of sobriety. He's wrote a memoir on sobriety. He's a writer. He does a bunch of other stuff. I'm happy to have him on. I love hearing from people that either listen to the show or those that have questions or comments about stuff, or people that just reach out and say, hey, man, I want to tell my story. I want to spread some hope. I want to, share my message, some of the things I've been through. So I always appreciate that. So thank you, Mark, for taking the time to come on. How are you doing today?
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Drew. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. So
Yeah. And tell me, Mark, where do you live now and where did you grow up?
I live in Coventry in the UK. Coventry sort of in the middle of England. Um, I was born and raised here from an Irish family. My parents moved to Coventry in the 60s looking for work. My dad was from Waterford in the southeast of Ireland, and my mum was from just outside Belfast. And they met in Coventry. So my background is, I grew up from an Irish family. Um, Thousands, moved to Coventry from Ireland in the 60s because it was a boom town. We had car factories. It was really big on industry back then. So you could move over from Ireland on a Friday. You'd walk into a job on a Monday. And it was a great place to grow up. And sort of my issues with alcohol really started from quite an early age. Probably about 14, I started drinking, and by the time I was 23, I was I was just a wreck. I had no direction, no job, no prospects, because I couldn't handle drink. At 14, it gave me a bit of confidence. First time I had a drink, I was very shy as a child. Um, so when I started drinking, it sort of gave me a bit of Dutch courage, as they say. So it sort of let me sort of come out of my shell, come out of myself. And I think when you grow up in an Irish family, it's renowned the Irish like a drink. And I think because growing up in Coventry in the UK, um, we always embrace our Irish heritage. And I think I tried to push it too far. I want to be more Irish than you. I want to drink more than you. So by the time I was 16, 17, I was drinking far more than was healthy for me. So it was,
Yeah. I just want to say real quick, there's a ton of stuff I can relate to. Just a fun fact. I was actually born in England, been out here in the US most of my life since I was 2. I have family out there. Last time I was there I was 18, which was years ago. And I remember being able to drink at the age of 18 because here in the US, you had to be 21. And I just remember going, yeah, this is awesome. You know,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. They were letting me drink. But I want to go back to the beginning real quick. You said something that was very interesting to me, something I could totally relate to, which is just that courage, that you get when you take a couple drinks, and you also said that, you were on the shy end. I was as well sometimes. Like, I could be outgoing in some situations, but I found that I was pretty shy in some of the social settings, and man, a couple drinks, a few drinks, it just fixed that. But I had issues with it right away. Did you notice, like, straight from the beginning, you had a kind of a different relationship with alcohol than most people?
Yeah. Um, I quickly found that, obviously initially it gave me courage, confidence to come out of my shell. And again, I think going from my dad liked to drink, but he was a social drinker. And when we were kids, we used to go to the Irish clubs when we were kids. We'd sit, in the corner. I'd see my dad standing at the bar drinking pints with his mates, and it seemed such a great. I want to be like him. And my dad could drink, you know, a hell of a lot, but it never affected him, in his responsibilities. He'd never miss work. He'd go to work. Um, so it never, affected him negatively. But I quickly discovered that when I drank, I couldn't function the next day. Hangovers used to destroy me. And when you're still at school, it didn't really affect me that much because if I didn't go to school, so what? But being, I could get, like you just said, you could get, the legal drinking age in the UK is 18. I could get served in bars and pubs when I was 14, 15. I didn't really think I looked any older than my mates, but it's just that I could get served. But when I started getting 16, 17 and left school and got a job, I just couldn't work. If I went out drinking on a Thursday night, we used to get paid on a Thursday back then. You'd get your wages in a little envelope. I'd go straight to the pub Thursday night, and I couldn't get up for work on a Friday morning. And so quite quickly, I realised, maybe drinking's not for me. But you don't want to admit that, do you? It's the little voice in the back of your head will say it, but when you drink, you're a man. Especially when you come from an Irish family, you want to keep up the family sort of tradition, being a hard drinking man. But it just affected me from a very early age. I couldn't go to work. I lost so many jobs because of my unreliability. Um, that it was, even my dad, he used to say it to me, but not preach to me or lecture me. He just says, you're not cut out for it. If you can't get up for work in the morning, maybe you should. But you don't listen, do you? When you're in your teens, you just think you know everything. And I didn't want to admit out loud that I should stop drinking. So I just kept going.
Yeah, there was, I remember when I was younger, like, I remember the first time I drank, and I've talked about it on here before, but I had a blackout the first time. First night, I had tried sips here and there, when I was younger, but the first time where I could really was around, away from parents, and was around friends, and there was enough alcohol there to actually get drunk. I remember we were drinking this vodka, and I remember puking like crazy that night. I remember blacking out, but the thing was, is kind of like you were saying, there was just something magical about it in the beginning, and I just, because I was so young, people would try and tell me too. It was kind of the same thing, like your dad talking to you and saying, "Hey, look, if you can't show up for work in the morning, like, maybe it's not for you." I kind of had
Yeah.
similar things going on where I had people having conversations with me where they're saying, "Look, I just don't think this is for you. It's just, you just started and you're already running into problems." But the thing was, being young, it was the same thing for me. Like I couldn't listen to anyone. There was
Uh,
nothing that all these older people could say to me at that time. But I want to ask you, is it was probably hard too, seeing your dad, who was such a functional person when it came to drinking, and he's able to go out to the bar. You see him sitting at the bar having fun with his friends. You see him enjoying a good drink, but then you see him going to work the next day. Was it frustrating not being able to basically drink like your dad did and be
yeah,
able to show up for work?
yeah, it was, because, when you're a kid, your first hero is your dad. And, and he was, like I say, he had it tough. My mom died when I was 7. So my dad, he was in his early 30s. He was, 3 young children. I was 7. My sister was a year older at 8, and my younger brother was 3. So he luckily, well, I say luckily, we had family around that rallied round and helped my dad no end. But I always, even now, my dad's been dead 20 years this year, but even now, I still cringe with embarrassment and shame that, well, he needed us when we were getting older, obviously, to start pulling our weight and making a life a little bit easier for him. I was making it harder. Well, not, just my drink just got the worst of me. And but I just wanted to be like my dad. It was but I just couldn't handle the drink. And but like you say, seeing him go out to work every day, he, he was like almost like I say a superhero. And his power was he could drink 10, 15 pints of beer on a night, and in the morning he'd be as right as rain. Not a you wouldn't even think he'd had a drink. And so I think you just want to be like him. And I used to think, even when I was drinking and I knew it wasn't good for me, I was thinking maybe next time it'll be better. Maybe next time I'll get up for work after a few beers. But it just never happened. And he used to get me jobs. I'd get sacked from one job because I wouldn't turn in, and then my dad would, with his drinking in the Irish bars, he'd get me jobs with other contractors and that. But I just let them down time and time again. And like I say now, even like 20 years on, I still, when I think about some of them things, and you just want to, you know, hopefully there's a heaven so I can say sorry one day properly to him. But, he was a great man. And there's so many people like him in Coventry who, all come over from Ireland, and most, got married, had families, others who they just work and drink, work and drink. They didn't have families. They just moved here for the work. So we used to grow up and we'd see them, all the lads drinking. And I think it was wrong that's, one of my best mates, when I was growing up, we aspired just to be drinkers. That was it. We didn't have any aspirations for, you know, greatness on the sporting field or anything. It was just, oh, it'd be great to just go out, drink, drink, drink. And, but like I say, it's hard when you get to 18 and 19 and you wake up in the morning and you think, I've got no job. I've got no prospects. What's holding me back? And even though I knew it was a drink, it wasn't until 23 when I just woke up one day and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And I just stopped dead, and that was it. It was, as they say, no looking back. But it's hard, even now, sometimes you want to, I don't want to drink, I much prefer sobriety to drinking. But I just think back to them days and think, I wish I could have just enjoyed a few pints with my dad without him
Yeah.
thinking, oh, we're going to have these drinks, but you're not getting up for work in the morning. So
Yeah. And you said something too that I totally, a bunch of stuff I relate to, but one of them was where you were talking about like, oh, maybe this time when I go out, I'll be able to wake up
uh,
the next day. Like, that was, man, that was the same thing for me. I kept running into the same problems. I kept running into the same issues, like not, not showing up for work, or just not showing up for things that I've already committed to. And I'd say, you know what, that's it. I'm gonna relax. I'm not gonna drink as much. And then before you know it, I'm going out, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna drink tonight, but this time I'm gonna make sure I get to work the next day or
yeah,
whatever it is. And I just couldn't do it. Like, when I was drinking, I had all I you know what it was. And there's a part in a book related to recovery where it talks about, like, we basically have the best intentions. Like, we have great intentions. Hey, I want to go out. I
yeah,
want to have a couple drinks, and I'll be fine. I'll show up for work tomorrow. But, we just don't have much follow through, and that was
yeah,
me. I had every intention of kind of being a functional drinker, and things working out, and just going out and having a good time, but being able to handle all my responsibilities, but I just couldn't back it up. I just, no matter how hard I tried. I wanna ask you real quick, Mark, was payday, so the Thursday when you get paid, and then you said, you'd go straight to the bar. So I used to get paid on a Friday, and
yeah.
it was like, oh man, the feeling I would have in my stomach just knowing that I was going to get paid and I could go straight to the bar. Was it like that for you? Where you were just
God,
like
yeah,
so excited?
yeah. Thursday was um, the pubs were packed, on a Thursday night, back then, because it was quite a regular thing. People would get paid on a Thursday, and I don't know why, because it sort of changed. That this was we'd get paid weekly, um, on a Thursday, and as soon as it would be go straight home, get changed, you'd go out, meet your friends, and you had the full wage packet, so you felt rich. But come Saturday night, Sunday night, you were skint. No money whatsoever. And it was then I'd be borrowing money off my dad just so I could get my lunch at work. Um and there was even bars then. We used to go in, we could probably go in on a Sunday night, and I'd probably have just a couple of pound left. And you'd ask the landlord, the gaffer of the pub, sub me a tenner. So he'd give you 10 quid, so because he knew straight away that £10 was going straight back into his till. And then on the Thursday night, you'd go down the pub and you'd pay him the £10 back, and then you'd drink all night Thursday, and then you'd go back in on a Sunday, and you'd be borrowing that £10 again. So that £10 used to pass hands back and forth between me and him. And I used to think, God, I was 18, 19 years of age, and it's like, you you know, friends of mine who were working the same, they would still come out drinking and that, but they were saving up and buying houses and getting on the property ladder. And I was just trying to get to Sunday, but having a few pound in my pocket. Um,
Oh, yeah.
it was,
I was the same
yeah,
way. I was the exact same way. And you know what's funny is, along the way, I actually found myself in some decent paying jobs somehow, right? And oh, it was the same thing. I'd get paid on a Friday, and I'd feel like just a king, and I'd go out and I would drink as much as I could, and I'd be using a bunch of other stuff, and I would always wake up the next day like pretty much broke already. And it was the exact same thing. Now I'm going into work, and I'm asking like coworkers if I could borrow money to buy lunch, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy, because they're like, dude, we get paid decent money, and you're out already? Like, what's going on? We got
yeah,
paid yesterday. Or and yeah, it was the same exact thing as well, because they're saving money, and they were getting like newer cars, and they're building a life. And I was, you know what it was? I really just lived for like the short term. Like, my life was all about just, those Friday nights, or whatever. But the thing was, is it's a hard way to live, because you're having that one really good night, but then the rest of the week you're kind of going hungry and
yeah.
stressed out because you don't have money. I think that started to play a role in me, like, thinking about getting sober. Was I had done that for a good amount of years. And what kind of made you start to think, maybe I need to stop doing this?
Well, like I say, I pretty much exhausted all my job opportunities. Um, I left school with no qualifications. I wasn't a very good student. Um, left school with no qualifications. So the first few jobs I had were, again, I pretty much blew them just by my unreliability. That so at the time, all I was doing was being a labourer on building sites. Um, my uncle, who was a plasterer, my dad's brother, he took me on to train me as a plasterer. Um, but I think it was before he took me on, I broke my hand in again a drunken accident. I fell off the roof trying to climb into my bedroom window because I forgot my key. So when he took me on to train me as a plasterer, um, after a while, I just couldn't hold the trowel all day long because of my hand. So I was his basically I was just his labourer. Um, and my uncle took ill. He got it was bowel cancer, and he was in the hospital. He had because they discovered it quite late. He had an operate. They had to have put an operation to remove part of his bowel. And while he was in hospital, there was something went wrong with the. He had some tubes inside him that something leaked, and it nearly killed him. He was on a life support machine, and me and my dad went to visit him in the hospital, and it just scared the life out of me because I saw my uncle in a hospital bed. It's like an epiphany. I thought that's me in a few years' time, but obviously not cancer. I just thought that's going to be me, a drunken wreck at 30. And I went out that night, got absolutely shit faced drunk, and then woke up the next day, and all I could think about was my uncle Sean in hospital. I thought I've got no job, no prospects. Um, my employer and my uncle is in hospital. So, and I just said that day, I goes, that's it. I'm never drinking again. Few days into that, it's a bit of a bold statement, isn't it? As you know yourself, it's one day at a time. So I thought, I can't say I'm never going to drink again. So I just, probably in my own head, I retracted that and thought, right, just knock it on the head, few months, try and get your life sorted. Um, so I never left the house for about, I think it was probably between 2 weeks and a month. I just used to go out to the shop, get some cigarettes because I was smoking at the time, and then just go home and just sort of cut myself off, or cut myself away from all my friends, the pubs and everything. And after, I think it was about a month, my dad could see I was serious, really, really trying to do that, stay sober. So he paid for me to have get my driving license. So I was 23 and still didn't have a driving license because I just blew all my money on drink. And so I stopped drinking in the I think it was the 12th or the 13th of October, 1990 was the last time I had a drink. In January 91, I passed my driving test, got my driving license, which was personally a massive achievement just because of where I was a few months before. And then in the February, my auntie in Ireland, she said, "Why don't you come over here?" Because I wasn't working. My uncle was still in recovering from his operation. My auntie Jean in Ireland, they were building an extension on the house. Um, they lived just outside Belfast. That was my mum's sister from just outside Belfast, and they said, "Come over, just help us out around the house, with the labouring and the contractors." Um, so I just thought, yeah, why not? And I had to get away from Coventry, from that temptation from my mates, to drinking and that. And, like I said earlier, moving to Ireland to get sober, it's probably unheard of. But for me, it worked. And I was there probably 18 months, just short of 2 years, I think. And it was the best thing I ever did because I had family supporting me. And no one, even though we used to go to Ireland a lot as kids, but no one knew me there as a drinker. Like in Coventry, it was whenever I used to go in near a pub in Coventry with my friends, it'd always be, "Go on, have a drink, have a drink." But when I moved to Ireland, I didn't get that. It was just we went out the first night we went out in Ireland. My cousin Tony took me out um, to one of the local bars, and they said, "What are you drinking?" And I said, "Oh, I'll have a 7 Up." And they says, "Oh, do you not fancy a pint?" And I just said, "No, I don't drink." And that was it. It was never questioned again. Whereas back home, it would be, "Go on, have a pint, get a lager or a Guinness inside you." But in Ireland, that was it. And to have that, not have that pressure to have a drink was, oh, it was immense. But it was so peaceful. Whenever you went out, then because when I was in Coventry, it was you go in and I'd be on edge myself, trying to think, don't have a drink, don't have a drink, don't have a drink. And you just got that, you're fighting yourself. But in Ireland, it was just because it wasn't expected of me to have a Guinness or a lager or that. It was just every time I went out, it was just so peaceful, and it really worked. It was I think because for me, I never went to a meeting, and I'm not against meetings or we all do recovery our own way. But I think for me, it was just getting away from the temptation and my old habits and just having, a new direction. When in Ireland, again, funny thing is my friend, my cousin Tony, he got me one day, he says, "Come out and have a game of golf." And I'd never played golf in my life. And it was, and I thought, "No, I'm not doing that." And he said, "Well, what else are you going to do?" You know, so I thought, okay, why not? So I went out, played golf, and I loved it. And it was, again, but I think it was replacing one addiction for another because quite quickly I got addicted to golf, but it kept me out of the pub and it got me out in the fresh air. And, I don't know if you've ever played golf, but it's a game that can drive you to drink because it's so frustrating. You can be like Tiger Woods one day and, Scooby Doo the next, and it was just, but it worked for me. It kept me out of the pub and it just gave me a bit of direction, a bit of focus. So instead of some days where you'd have a bit of a tough day at work and you just want to go to the bar and have a few pints. I used to go up to the driving range and hit some golf balls. It was just the best thing that I ever did. It was just getting away from um, temptation. So so I do sort of quite often joke. I mean, I know recovery, it's not really a joking matter, but I think I'm the only person that's ever gone to Ireland to get sober.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so cool to listen to your story though, because you just touched on so many things, like especially which I try and tell a lot of people. I have people that reach out sometimes and say like, "Hey, like where can I start? Like I'm thinking about making a change. Where can I start?" And kind of like you just talked about right now, my first thing is the environment. Your habits and environment. Breaking away from going to the pub with all those old friends that you used to drink with all the time. I had to do the same thing because what would happen is I'd get sober for maybe a little bit and I'd start to feel better and I would think that I was stronger than I was. So what I would do is I'd go out to the bar with all those friends that I used to drink with all the time. And maybe the first couple times I'd say no, I don't want to drink. But like you talked about, kind of the social pressures of everyone saying, "Come on, man, like what's going on with you? You used to love drinking with us. Have a drink." Eventually I would give in. So I'm really glad that you talked about that, kind of breaking away from all that stuff and giving yourself a break. And another thing I want to touch on too is when you're talking about like you can get sober without having to go to meetings too. Like I was someone who went to meet a ton of meetings in the beginning. I still go to them here and there today, but I love that, but I also understand now that there's plenty of people that get sober without them. It's just the way it is. So I love hearing that because we talk about I love meetings. We talk about them a lot on this podcast, but I love hearing from people that also didn't go to meetings. I love hearing about the different ways that people get sober. And one last thing I want to touch on real quick is I really like that you mentioned you found golf. You found something that getting outside, getting some exercise, keeping your mind busy. I think that's so important. Is finding something that we got to have fun sober. We have to find a way to have fun sober. We got to have things that we enjoy because I'm like a firm believer that if I can't eventually enjoy sobriety, it's just not going to last. But I want to ask you, what do you think was? Did you have like what was the hardest part about early sobriety? Did you have any? Did you have any close calls where you almost went to the pub, or were you okay most of the time?
Well, early on, it was like I say, the first um, month, I probably never left the house. But when I started to go out again, I just thought, I was getting stir crazy in the house. I thought I just need to go out. And I was playing football back then, or soccer, as you guys call it. And so I started going football training again. Um, that was hard because after football training, we'd always go down to the pub. Um, because the um, most of the football teams that were on like Sunday or Saturday league football in Coventry were pub teams. So you'd go to the pub after training. The game would be on a Sunday morning. We'd play, go back to the pub after the game. So it was, and I could feel, you know, that that pull. Even though I didn't want to drink, I could feel that I would eventually crack because you get to the point where, like you said yourself, sometimes you go maybe a month or two and you think, well, maybe I've proved I can stay off it for a month or two. Maybe I'll just go out and have 2 or 3 pints on a Saturday night or a Sunday afternoon or something. But with me, when I was drinking, it was never about having one or two. It was trying to get as much drink inside you before they called time at the bar. And I just never trusted myself to be able to have one or two. The only time I could do that is if when I wasn't working, if I had a few pound in my pocket, I used to go down the pub on a lunchtime most days. Back then in the UK, in the late 80s, the pubs used to close at 2:30 in the afternoon and then open up again at 6. So I would go down at 2 o'clock. So I knew that I could probably only have 3 pints. But even when I think then, I thought, why did I need to drink every day at lunchtime? And it was, and again, I just can't answer it. It was just, I had to go to the pub. I was scared if I wasn't there, I would miss out on something, you know, miss out on somebody telling a funny story or, just anything. But I just had to go to the pub every day. And so the only time I could do it without knowing that I could get absolutely wrecked is just going that I could only get a few pints in before last orders. But I just never trusted myself to, even though I was thinking, oh, I haven't had a drink for 3 months. Maybe I'll just go out today and have a few pints with the lads after training. But I just didn't trust myself to have two or three. I thought 2 or 3 is gonna lead to 10. And then, you know, just got my driving license. I'll go out and take my dad's car out drunk. I wouldn't, because I didn't trust myself not to do that, which is why I didn't get my license while I was drinking, because I just felt I would be a liability. But yeah, in the early stages, there was a lot of just didn't trust myself. But like I say, but when I moved to Ireland, it was like I know it's a cliche. It was a fresh start and a new beginning, but it really was. And also with that, I was getting jobs. People were employing me because they didn't. Back home in Coventry, people didn't trust me. Oh, we're not employing him. He's not going to turn up in the morning. And even when I've stopped drinking, but you know, they still wouldn't give me a chance. And I don't blame them. But in Ireland, I had that where people didn't know me as a drinker. And when I got a job, I was reliable. Um, and it did rebuild my life. I've got a career over there, even though I only stayed like 18 months. I started a job that led me to, when I moved back to Coventry, I stayed within that industry for 20 odd years and sort of worked my way up from a service engineer to a service manager, where I was in charge of like 50 odd engineers. So it was, but I wouldn't have done any of that. I think if I'd have stayed in Coventry, I don't think I was, you know, I don't think I would have recovered. I just would have went back into my old ways eventually. But, that's something we'll never know because it didn't happen. I got away, but I do know deep down that I would have cracked and went back on it because it was just, that was the culture in, in a lot of the UK. There is a big drinking culture. You probably, when you said you were here at 18, you've probably seen that. It's, I'm not against it at all, because people can function when they drink. But I just know for me, it wasn't. We weren't good bedfellows, as they say. Me and alcohol. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I realize that there's plenty of people out there that they don't drink like I do. They're able to handle it. They have a couple. I've seen people take sips of wine and then they say things like, "Oh, I'm starting to feel it. I'm going to put this down." And it's funny. You were mentioning kind of drinking and uh, like we almost drank as it like we were trying to just get as drunk as we possibly could.
mm,
And when you were talking about like you'd start drinking at the pub and just from the time you started till closing time or whatever, it's just like let's see how many I can get in. It's like I was the exact same way. And I love that you mentioned just the work history and just what a difference it makes going from people that can't even show up to work on certain days after we drink to then you being able to show up, be super reliable, and end up managing other people. It's such a cool thing to hear about the changes that go on. I've seen some of the most unreliable people go on and get sober and turn into some of the most reliable people. And it's such a cool thing to hear about. I want to ask you, Mark, when did you get into writing? How did that come about?
um, oddly enough, it was when um, I was going to California back in '95. I've got family in LA. Um, my dad's sister, Maura, she moved to Los Angeles, I think in the late 50s. So I've got, and my dad's brother followed her a few years after. So I've got some family in Los Angeles. We were going over, I think it was 1995. And my uncle said to me in Coventry, he just said, keep a diary. And I thought, I've never written anything since I left school, and in school I only wrote because I had to, and in class assignments. And my uncle John said, "Keep a diary." So I think it was after the first day, I thought maybe I will, and so I got a notepad and I started writing down. Like went to Disneyland, went to Rodeo Drive, did this, did that. But after about 4 days, I was finding rather than just writing a couple of lines, I was writing pages because my cousin Mikey, he took us to Sedona. He took us to Grand Canyon, to Vegas. So I just found that I was writing about all these places I've been, and from going from a couple of lines, I was doing 3, 4 pages every day. And at the end of the day, I was really looking forward to getting my journal out and writing down what we'd done that day. And when we got home after the trip, I felt a bit empty. I thought there's something missing from my life, and I missed writing. And this is going back, like I say, the 95. So I started writing short stories, and I've never had anything never really did anything with it. And I've been writing a screenplay for for about 25 years, and I just keep stopping it, you know, doing a bit more, then stopping, doing a bit. And it was only in probably the last 6 months I thought, right, I want to get this finished, and I've really started um, working on it. It's a story about addiction and recovery, and just for my own um, sort of making notes of the book, I released Staying Sober. I just started writing a few notes on my own journey, just to sort of help with my screenplay. And as I started writing this, I thought, well, maybe I've got a story to share with people who it might help. If it helps one person, then, like I say, it doesn't preach to people, this is what you have to do to stay sober. It's just what works for me. And hopefully people will, take something from that. So, so the screenplay, it's still going, but because I really enjoyed writing this book, I'm turning the screenplay more into a novel. And because I just really enjoyed the writing process of writing, the book I just released. And so it's basically that, my Uncle John just said to me one day, keep a diary. And from somebody who was, an absolute worst student ever in school, um, I'm now a published author. Even though I published it myself, it's still, as somebody said to me, you've got a book out there, you're a published author. So if ever I met my old headmaster from school who told me one day, you're going to amount to nothing, sonny, because I wouldn't pay attention in his English class, and this one's for you, Mr. Pitt. I'm a published author. So but yeah, it's just, and it's quite therapeutic as well. And I'm sure you have, things that you do that, your podcast, I've been watching the last month or so, and it's some of the stories you tell and the people you get on. So I'm sure that really helps with your recovery. Um, and your TikTok videos and that they're inspirational. So it's and I just hope one day somebody might pick up my book and read it and think, well, actually, um, whether it'll either help them or maybe somebody they know who's having a few issues with drink. I'm not saying everyone's going to have the chance to move away from their hometown, because it's not. I was lucky; I have family who backed me with that, but not everyone's going to have that. But they may think, well, actually, I can just stop going to these places and stop mixing with these people. They might be the best friends in the world to them, but if they're not good for you and your recovery, you need to break away. So hopefully, people might take just a small piece of advice. And I don't, like I say, pretend to preach to anyone, because it's I know myself when, even though my dad, he wasn't lecturing me or telling me to stop drinking, he would sow the seed in the back of my head. But I think when people actually say to you, you can't do this, you can't do that, I'm quite defiant. I will do it just to spite them. So I think, when I stopped drinking, it was first and foremost for myself. And I'm just glad that when I did, it's improved the life of people around me.
Yeah, and that's congratulations on the book as well. That's really cool. You're gonna have to give me the information. I'll put that
Well,
in the episode details. But it is, you just never know by putting one thing I've learned about this whole process is you just never quite know who needs to hear what you have to say, and or who needs to hear your experience. And I love that you talked about it's not preaching. You're just kind of, because I was the same way. If someone told me, if they came at me and said, "Look, you can't do this, you can't do that, or you have to do this, you have to do that," I was the same way. It's like I couldn't hear it. I would automatically block it out. But when someone kind of starts talking to me about their experience and they're talking about their drinking or what they do to stay sober, what they did themselves, all of a sudden you just never know who it's going to help, and all of a sudden people they can start listening, and yeah, like you mentioned before, even if it helps one person, that's kind of how I am with the podcast as well. It's like man, if there's one person that just gets that, just a little speckle of hope, and maybe it's not right now, maybe it's down the road, but that's cool stuff, and I'm glad that you bring that up, and that's something I've found just being just in sobriety in general is, when you, because a lot of us don't wanna put our story out there. A lot of us had a lot of shame about it,
Yeah,
or kind of guilt, like we kinda talked about, where you think, "Man, I wish I would've, just treated people better, or I wish I would've, just behaved better," but I find that once you start putting it out there, it's amazing, because then people will start kind of telling stuff to you about what's going on with them, and it kind of just opens this communication channel where people get to grow. So I'm really glad. Thank you for bringing that up, Mark.
yeah.
I'm getting kind of towards the end here. I want to ask you, and I normally ask everyone this, but what is some advice that you'd give to someone who's just starting the journey, who's just kind of, maybe they're at that point that you and I were at, where we loved alcohol, but it wasn't really, we're realizing, hey, I can't get up for work, or I can't stand the hangovers. What would your advice be on just kind of getting started on turning things around?
It's, it's again, sometimes things can be like sound like cliches and that when you say it, but it all I'd say, it's worth it. There's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of real struggle, inside your own head when you're just like you say, just starting out. You're going to be battling every day. I need a drink. I need a drink. But just fighting that, and it the journey at the end is worth it. Like I say, I've been 35 years in next month, and I did have a little bit of a wobble a couple of probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I just I had a craving for Guinness, um, and we used to go out to this pub quite regular, and I used to sit there, and even like I thought I would never have this battle again where I would be thinking I need a drink, but I just thought I just want a Guinness because it's so. I used to drink Guinness when I was drinking, but not to get drunk. When I wanted to get drunk, I would drink lager, I would drink cider, I would drink vodka. Guinness was sometimes I would go out and maybe have 2 or 3 pints of Guinness to start the evening because I just loved the taste of it. And then I would stop drinking it because it's too heavy to when you're just drinking to get, self-destruct. It's not the drink for that because you can't drink it pint after pint after pint. Well, I couldn't. And 3 or 4 years ago, I just thought, I really want a Guinness. And I kept saying, maybe I'll just have a half. Just a half a pint and that will do me. And then I thought, if I did that, then the next night I thought, well, maybe a pint tonight, and it really, and I just saw it's just not worth it, because what I've experienced in the last 35 years of sobriety, it eclipses anything I ever experienced when I was drinking. So it's stick with it, try and whether, just isolate yourself away from temptation, bad habits. But, it's gonna be hard, because sometimes cutting yourself off from lifelong friends and companions, it's not easy, and people sometimes, they look down I think they look down on you for that, because you've just cut yourself away, and they think it's personal, that you've against them, but it's not against them, you're doing it for you, and ultimately, at the end of the day, you've just gotta do what works for you, and just hopefully at the end, when you've sort of go down the path and, you stay on in recovery, them friends then will accept you for that and just embrace it. It's we're all on our own road, and it's worth it. Just don't give up. Just stick with it and it will be worth it.
Yeah, and I think that's all really, really great advice. And Mark, thank you for sharing that, at 30 something years you got kind of you got a craving, because I think that's I think that's important for people to hear that you can have years of sobriety, you can have a ton of years, and you still got to kind of watch out a little bit here and there. So I'm really glad that you bring that up, because I know for me when I first got sober, like I'm over 5 years sober now, but I remember when I first started, I remember thinking, oh, if I ever got to 2 years sober, if I ever got to 3, 4, 5 years sober, I'd be just on top of the world. I would never think about drinking. And what I realized as time went on, it's like, oh, my life's better than it's ever been in addiction. That's for sure. I'm more grateful than I've ever been. But I mean, it's not every day is still easy, and it's not like I'm immune to ever going out and feeling like a drink or going out to get a drink. So I'm glad that you bring that up, because I've seen people that have been sober for a lot of years, and I've seen what happens when they do go back out, and it's scary. It's scary, man. And I think what happens is a lot of times people, they start drinking even harder, because they're like, "Man, I had all these years of sobriety, and I went out, and it doesn't end up good." So thank you for that, Mark. I'll ask you one last question here. How do you stay motivated for someone? This is kind of geared towards the people that have been sober for a lot of years. How do you stay motivated after so many years of sobriety? What kind of keeps you going? What motivates you? Is it thinking about how bad it used to be? Is it thinking about how good it is now? What personally motivates you nowadays?
It's just remembering how bad I was, um, when I was drinking, how unreliable I was, and quite often it's, like I say, my dad, he passed away 20 years ago, um, and even when, like, a few years ago, when I say I was having that craving for Guinness, it was, I just didn't. I thought I'd be letting his memory down if I'd have, because I just don't trust myself. Even like 30 years in, 35 years in, I don't trust myself to stop at one point. And my wife said to me, we've been married 8 years this year, and when we were first dating, she said to me, I've been off the drink for so long. She says, "Don't you think you could just go out and have one or two?" And I just said, the answer is I don't know. I just don't know, and I don't want to risk it because everything I've built up since then. And I think I would just be well, firstly, I would let myself down, but I don't want to let down the memory of my dad and the people in Ireland who helped me um, get sober. It's just, I've achieved so much since then. It's not worth the risk. I've even trying it. The funny, I say funny story. When my wife, we first got together, we went to a family gathering in Ireland, and my auntie May, she had a half a Guinness on the table, and I picked up the drink. I picked up her half a Guinness, and I took a mouthful. I just took a quick swig, put it down again, and it was just a small mouthful, just because I wanted that taste. And my wife was horrified. "What you doing? What you doing?" And it was just. But even then, I was thinking. I sat there staring at her drink for 10, 15 minutes, thinking, "Shall I? Shan't I?" But that's the only time that I've intentionally took a drink in like 35 years, and I stopped at the mouthful. But I wouldn't trust myself to do it again. Yeah, because it's just. I think like yourself, you've achieved so much in um and what you're doing, it's fantastic. And I just feel it's the risk. It's just not worth, you know, just not worth trying. Even to think tomorrow, go down the pub, have a half a pint of Guinness, and come home again. I just don't trust myself to stop there. So I'm not even gonna, you know, not even gonna try it. Um, Even like the toughest time, I think, when my dad passed away. Um, I didn't even think about having a drink, and I thought that would be something that would push me. Um, but even, I just thought that would just piss all over his memory if I'd have gone out and had a few drinks at his funeral or his wake. And I just thought, no, I'm not doing it. Um, it's just like you say, it's just I've achieved so much in the 35 years that I never thought possible when I was drinking. I just thought I'm going nowhere in my life. Um, and I think even recently, my wife said to me, her brother, um, I don't know if he's read the book, but I think his sisters told him about the book. And he was saying, but he was only 23. He couldn't have been that bad, because he's still, you're still just a kid, you're not you know, alcoholism is alcoholism, no matter what age you are. And I used to say to us, well, it affected my life so negatively. It doesn't matter whether I was 23 or 43, it just wasn't for me. So sometimes people do look down on it a bit and say, oh, you were only a kid when you stopped. So you couldn't have been that bad. But, you know, we're all at our own, I know it's again a cliche, people say, oh, I hit rock bottom, then I stopped drinking. But, rock bottom's different for everyone, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I've seen people whose alcoholism has taken over in 2 years, and I like that you bring that up. It's a great point because it's just so different for everyone. And I want to touch on this real quick. You mentioned and this is I think is so common. We probably all get this, but you've been sober for a lot of years, and you meet your wife, and she says, "Hey, like, don't you think you've been sober for a long time? Don't you think you'd be able to have one or two?" I've had the same thing happen to me. It's a pretty common. People just don't understand it because they haven't been through the alcoholism that we have. But I think that's really cool that you bring that up because and especially the thinking like, could I have one? Could I have two? I was the same way. That used to always run through my head. It was like, maybe now I could have one or two. But the thing is, when I look back on it, like very honestly, I never had one or two. Like,
Uh,
unless I was in a situation where I really had to try super hard. But even in those situations where I had to be careful and I could only have one or two, I was miserable because I could only have one or two because it kind of woke up the monster, but I couldn't keep drinking, so it was a rough thing.
yeah.
I'll ask you this real quick, Mark. What is your goal over the next year, whether it has to do with sobriety or anything that you're working on with writing or just anything in your personal life? What do you think is a goal of yours over the next year or two?
Well, the main goal really, I think, is I want to spend more time away from work, because I got into the stage, and I think a lot of it is down to the fact that I couldn't hold down a job when I was so young, that I do work too much. I'm a workaholic. Um, I need to try and take a step back, and just spend more time with my wife, Karen. More holidays. We haven't really had a holiday for a few years. We're going away to Greece in 3 weeks. So I think my goal is one is spend more time with Karen. Um, and I'm hoping that, if I can get my book finished, the novel I'm working on, that hopefully that will, open a few doors for me where I can sort of replace my full-time job with writing, you know, um, be more professional. And I'm hoping, obviously using social media to try and, you know, this book, Staying Sober, is hopefully going to open a few doors for my novel. But even if it doesn't, it's just if someone reads it, because I did get a message, I think a week after the book went on Amazon, and it was from a family friend. She'd bought it, and I didn't know, but she said she's been off drink for 7 months, because she's had her own issues, which again I didn't know anything about, and she said she found it really inspirational. Um, and that touches your heart a bit when it's particularly when it's someone close, but even if it's someone on the other side of the world, if they just sort of drop me a line and say, "Wow, this, helped me," that'll do me. I've got not really got any goals to be rich and famous or anything. I just want to try and take my foot off the gas and enjoy life a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. And that's kind of like the comment where someone, it just feels good because and it's kind of like we talked about where you tell your story and all of a sudden people start coming to you and they're willing to tell theirs. And I've had the same kind of thing where I'll post stuff and then I'll find out that someone I know or I've known for a while has been battling alcoholism or addiction themselves, and I didn't even know. I didn't know until I started talking about it a little bit more. But Mark, man, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time. It was super cool. You're really good at just naturally talking on a podcast. It's pretty awesome. But I appreciate you coming on and taking the time, man. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Drew. Thank you.